Well, today's something a little bit different for me, working on the air conditioning on a Workhorse. Never really tackled one. I've fixed air conditionings on other vehicles, but not a Workhorse chassis. This belongs to a friend of mine. It's a W22, 2005, and he's had it, gosh, I think he said he spent about $2,000 so far at 2 different places. They still haven't got it resolved. In fact, when it got here, first thing I noticed in checking it, the crazy relay is missing that controls the fans. So I don't know how anybody, so we got a new one here to replace it with. I checked the pressures earlier, and he's acting real crazy. Like possibly that the TXV valve may be sticking. So that's my plan. We got a brand new TXV valve, and if you need a TXV valve to fit a Workhorse, I think he got this at O'Reilly's. There's the part number, a Murray 38609. Got it the next day. It's kind of unique compared to a lot of the other ones that we see online. So anyway, we got that. And I got me some line wrenches, so I'm gonna get in here and try to get this TXV valve out. We've already got the Freon captured and removed, so we'll get this TXV valve replaced, pull a good vacuum, and see if we can get some cold air. Well, step one on this process, you gotta get all this goo off. Once you get all this off, you can actually see your fittings to the TXV valve. I've taken a 5/8 line wrench, remove the nut from the rear. Now I got to get this one loose, and the one in behind it back there, I got to get that loose. Kind of tight quarters, so let's see if we can get that done. Okay, so next step is to remove this nut. Look back here, this is a 7/8 inch nut. There's the O-ring, we're going to replace that too while we're at it. So you can get this out of the way. Don't attempt to try to get this nut loose first, because you'll have a hard time doing it. Might possibly break something off. So once you get it out here, you can get some room, then you can get a hold of this, hold it still, and then break this line off, or not break it off, but break it free. So that is our next process. Okay, well, this tip may help you. See how I got that wrench positioned? That's a 7/8 wrench. I got it positioned holding the TXV valve so it won't rotate, and then I use this 3/4 wrench to twist the nut loose. And man, it's on there tight. I don't know if it put Loctite on it or what. It's fighting me all the way. So a couple more turns and we'll have this off. Alright, so I mentioned, we need to put new O-rings on it. These O-ring assortments are handy. I think I got this at Harbor Freight. And because you can look at this old one, how pinched it is. So we got me a nice new one. And then I think there was the other one, the large size. Not too awful bad, but you want to make sure it does fit in there correctly. So we got that in there, and this one does fit, so I'll get that put on. And I got me some PAG oil here for lubrication to lubricate the O-ring as we put this back together. Okay, so I've got this good and tight, just like I did before, that little wrench trick where I held the TXV valve and used the large wrench to get that good and tight. Now the tricky part, I'm going to have to finesse this into place and not kink any of these capillary tubes. And you can see the PAG oil, it's nice and wet back there where I got that all lubricated well, so it'll slide on and protect that new O-ring. Okay, so remember what I said, get this one tight first while it's still out in the opening. And then when you get it back in here, tighten the rear one. You see what I've done? I got me a 5/8 wrench holding the TX valve still, while I use a 7/8 wrench to twist it counterclockwise and get it good and snug. So we got that part. Now we just got that little nut in the rear to get. Alright, well, TX valve replacement was no problem at all. Now we got to get this little clip back on there so it does its job. And I'm trying with one hand, but it's pretty tight. So let me get 2 hands and get that clipped on there. Alright, well, you see I got it on there, and we want to make sure our capillaries aren't rubbing anything. We don't want any rub outs. So if the capillary is rubbing something, vibration, you'll wear a hole in it for long. Everything looks good. Now I just got to get my sealant or my insulation wrapped around it. Alright, now ain't that pretty? Got it all wrapped up, sealed pretty tight. So now we just got to hook up some gauges and pull a good vacuum and see if we can't get this thing some Freon back in it. And I forgot to point out what I'm using. This stuff is called cork tight. That's what you use to wrap up around TXV valves. I did that on my Nissan repair a couple years ago. So far it's still working. Alright, you see it's getting dark. If you know my videos, I work a lot at night, so that's what we're doing tonight. You see I got my vacuum pump running. And something else I've got on here different. You might not normally see this. This is a micron gauge. This is a very good tool to tell us when we really get a good vacuum. To give you an idea, because this is going to measure, pounds of vacuum. Let me open this up here. Open up this. Alright, so it's pulling down. So it's pulling down 20 pounds of vacuum. Open that one up. Open it all the way. Open this valve all the way. Valve should always be all the way open or all the way closed. Alright, all the way open. Alright, now this is a micron gauge. What a micron gauge does, it really tells you, like, give an example. I think it takes 40,000 microns equals 1 pound of vacuum. So it's a super sensitive way to make sure you've got a good vacuum and that it's holding vacuum. It's been my experience to achieve a really good vacuum, you need to run these things for an hour to an hour and a half. Most places, most shops don't do that. They got jobs in front of them, behind them. They just want to get in, get out. So you see it's pulling it down to 11, 12. So I want to see this hopefully down to about 500 microns and let it sit here and run for at least an hour. And then once that gets done, I've got all these little fancy valves. I can isolate it. So I can shut this, separate this from the Freon that's going to be going back through. So that's what we're going to do. Let this sit here and run for a while and get us a really good vacuum. Alright, well, it's been running about an hour and 10 minutes. I got some really good numbers. 330 microns. Looks really good. Alright, so I'm going to isolate the vacuum pump. Alright. You see the numbers may climb up a little bit. Let's shut the pump off. Alright, we got that done. Let this sit for a minute, and then we'll see about getting some Freon put in it. Okay, just to show you what stage yet, I removed the long hose that went to the vacuum pump, and I put on this short hose. It just goes right to the can, this little adapter, and I've screwed this valve all the way in, so now the can pressure is now in this hose, but I've got it shut off right here. So now I'm going to isolate my gauge because I don't want to contaminate my gauge with any Freon. So it's turned off now. Alright, so let's purge a little of this out. Get the air out of it. There we go. Air is out. Get that tight. Alright. Now we got it going in slowly but surely. I'm going to shake this can. I'll put this one can in, and when it gets done, then I'll put this. You can see our pressure is rising already. When that gets done, I'll start the engine and go with our second can. Get us 32 ounces, just like the side here says. There you go. We need 32 ounces. Alright, we got cold air. At idle, we got about a 20-degree split. We're still tweaking with it. High side, it seems a little high for some reason. I don't know what that. It might be just because we're sitting here idling. And it's very, very humid too. Well, I got to say I'm sorry because this is where the video footage ended. I lost some footage on this repair. In fact, I made this repair last year, and I was kind of aggravated because I lost my camera footage. I never did post the repair video, but it does have good content to it, showing how to change out a TXV valve. It's probably pretty common repair. It's going to be more common as these RVs age. Remember, this was done on a W22, and they have a little bit different TXV valve than the W24, at least the ones I've seen. And I'll do a later video on my W24, kind of going all over the components and how to recharge it and stuff. But I just want to point out a few things. In fact, I got his. Oh, I also want to report. His name was Tim. He lives out in Arizona. He came out to see me. We fixed a few things on his RV. But he's put, since this repair, he's put 10,000 miles on it, and it's still blowing out ice cold air. But he had a lot of work done on the AC unit, and they didn't seem could get it solved. But anyway, we got it whipped for him, evidently. But here's his old TXV valve. Kind of cool how these work. Now, I remember your older systems. I remember I had an old Corvette, 1986 or something like that. Back in the day, they used just a fixed orifice. They just had one orifice size they didn't have TXV valves. So that created the restriction. With the TXV valve, they kind of adjust on the fly. So you got this little coil here. It's got refrigerant in it. This refrigerant goes in, so it's always sensing the temperature on the suction line. So as it changes, this little diaphragm will move back and forth, and it moves back and forth. It takes this little needle valve in and off its seat to control the flow of Freon. And I believe what was happening on this, if I remember by memory, it was stuck. We had real low suction and high pressures, and we wasn't getting hardly any cooling at all. But putting the new TXV valve in it took care of it. And this is something you can do yourself, just basic hand tools. You need to buy a couple specialty tools I was going to show you here. This is the vacuum pump I use at Harbor Freight. You see they're not very expensive. Now, one thing you can't cheap out on is on a set of gauges. I'll put a link to these gauges. These are really good. These are Yellow Jackets. You can see where I bought these back in 2018. And you buy these things, they'll last you many, many years. You can use them on many vehicles. So that's a good thing to have. And there's just tons of videos showing you how to add Freon to a vehicle. So that's not a problem. It's very easy how to teach yourself. What I find where people get messed up on, so many times you buy these little cans of Freon, you put it in, and they overcharge the system. Because if you look at these gauges, well, it's not a very good picture here. Okay, I found a picture of a gauge. I want to point out something. A lot of times what happens, because remember, pressure equals temperature with Freon. So in our Workhorse chassis, we use 134A. So if you got to go by this is our temperature, so 134A. So the outer ring, that's our PSI. So if you're running 30 PSI on the low side, then the temperature on that coil, look there, it's going to be about 35 or so, which that's ideal. But because once you drop below, if you drop down like 25 PSI, of course now you're below 30 degrees, you're going to get ice, and the coil's going to freeze up on you. So you only got that little sweet spot, and it's very easy to overshoot. So that's why you need gauges. If you buy those little cans of Freon and you put it in, and I know how people think, they say, okay, if it calls for 12 ounces, well, I want really, really cold air, I'm going to put in 20 ounces. Well, you just, by doing that, you overshoot. So instead of your temperature being 35 degrees, like being ideal, you add more Freon. As you add Freon, the pressure gets higher. So now you got 35, you got 40, maybe you got 50 PSI now on the suction. And you do that, now you've raised your coil temperature from 34 degrees. Now your coil temperature is up, 55 or so. You still get kind of cold air, but it's not as cold as it would be. Sorry about that noise. It wouldn't be as cold as it would be if you was in the correct pressure range back down here about 34. And I've made this mistake myself. And there's a pressure relief valve. I've had people call me because they do this very same thing. They put those cans in there, and then they run the RV, and all of a sudden this big puff of steam blows out from under the engine. What it is, there's a pop-off valve on the back of the compressor, and that pop-off valve will blow off the extra pressure. So I'll make another video, try to explain that better when I get into my W24. I just wanted to point that out. That's why we need gauges. And this TXV was kind of hard to locate because there's so many different ones, different versions, but I do know this works on the Workhorse W22 chassis. This particular one, there's the Murray part number, expansion valve, part number 38609. So I'll put that in the link, and we found it here at a local O'Reilly's and got that took care of. So if you got air conditioning troubles on your Workhorse, invest in a few tools, and you just do this repair yourself. And that way you can, since I bought these gauges, I fixed a Corvette, Nissan, a Dodge, several vehicles. I've replaced compressors on, TXV valves, several different projects. So these tools have paid for themselves over and over again. So if you like to tinker on this kind of stuff, you can teach yourself pretty easy how to do it. All right, I guess that'll wrap it up. I'll finish this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll try to make a better one later with my Workhorse W24. Have a blessed day. See you. Bye.